do not worry, you can save it to your local, but we will also share it with you afterwards. All right. Okay. Well, yes. Okay. Hey, Brian, thanks for letting some people in the waiting room here. When you can, we're still piling in. All right. Okay, we're gonna get started here. Hi, everyone. Thank you all for coming. Such a great turnout today. We've had over 150, it looks like 170 people register for this event. And so it's great to see everyone here in this exciting meeting. My name is Jean-Marc Flamme, and I'll be your host today. I'll introduce a fantastic panel here in a few moments. This is our very first session of the series of co-ownership of land and how to co-create your off-grid village with low-cost housing. So yeah, I live in the Kootenay Mountain region of BC on the west coast of Canada in the traditional territories of the Sinaiaks, and whom we are co-creating our future villages with. So where in the world are you? This is a question for you guys. Could you please post this in the chat? As well, please, if you can rename your name to first name, last name, and where you are. So we kept this a Zoom meeting so you can connect, you can matchmake amongst each other. You'd be surprised on how many people. Okay, this is awesome. Look at this flurry. I'm watching the chat here on my other screen of people, where they're from, traditional territories, and yeah, rename yourselves. Please connect throughout the presentation. Post some links of your LinkedIn profile, Twitter, whatever you'd like to do. So a little bit more about me. This is great. West Hat Sound, seeing all of this. You guys are seeing all this chat. That's super. A little bit more about me. I work on a variety of housing innovation and regenerative living organizations. I support all natural, automated home building and co-create regenerative villages, allowing us to move towards a better way to live. I've done about 25 years of software development in my career and 10 years now of hacking this hardware or the living infrastructure that I'm about to speak about, and experienced in this. Today, I'm focused on crushing the cost of living. I've probably been saying this for about 7 years now, so we could radically improve life and solve grand challenges. I'm excited to be with you here today. And just to be clear, this is the first in a series and a high-level overview. We know you'll have so many questions that need detailed questions like, where can I see them? And show me who is doing this. So we'll get to some of them today with a chunk of time for QA after our presentations, but you will be able to email and meet one-to-one with our expert panelists, as well as we're going to make this a regular series and host future sessions to dive deeper. Most importantly, this is a movement which needs your support to uncover all the options and examples out there. So thanks so much for your collaboration on all of this. Okay, so today's agenda. Awesome seeing all the chat here. So today's agenda, I hopefully will begin with an inspiring intro, hopefully not too much for you. And afterwards, we'll do a roundtable with panelists to chat specifically about how to get started with co-ownership and village development. So please feel free to chime in with questions on the chat. Okay, you got the agenda all good. Our panel here today, we've got Noam Dolgin from CoHo, BC. Noam Dolgin is a Metro Vancouver realtor, helps clients navigate BC's tough housing market, especially through co-ownership and other out-of-the-box thinking. Before entering real estate, Noam worked for more than 15 years in community development, environmental education, and consulting, and uses this expertise to assist clients in making social, economical, environmental sustainability a central component to their housing choices. Number two, we got Richard Letting from Letting and Company. Hey, Richard. Rick has practiced as a lawyer in BC since '82, predominantly in the areas of real estate and corporate commercial transactions. He has been involved in real estate in various ways, acting for a large number of creative real estate investors, as well as traditional buyers, sellers, investors, syndicators, and developers. Rick has extensive experience in setting up and acting for mortgage investment corporations and acts for numerous borrowers and private lenders. Thirdly, we have Brian Horwitz from Velocity Realty Inc. Brian, hey there, is a forward-thinking industry stakeholder and a representative in the real estate sector and realtor on Vancouver Island, specializing in co-ownership of rural properties. And yeah, everybody can hear me okay? Seeing in the chat that some people have issues. You can hear me? Okay, good. Brian, providing necessary resources. Brian works directly with his clients, covering the many aspects involved when it comes to co-purchasing rural properties or settling portions of interest. So Brian's ability to build and maintain strong working relationships enables him to continually succeed in creating successful collabs. And finally, but not least, Brian Brooks from Canadian Off-Grid Depot. And he applies his expert knowledge to your project, whether it's working with solar power, battery, propane, wood burning products. Living off the grid is becoming becoming so important to more people looking to save money and live sustainably. Working in the off the grid industry since 2010, Ryan spent 5 of those years with Unique Appliances, where he learned how to build an efficient infrastructure for your off-grid cabin or home before branching off on his own. So Canadian Off-Grid has contributed to experience and know-how to the development of all those off-grid appliances within the industry today to make them safer and more efficient for customers. So we've got a great panel. Thank you so much for attending, guys, here. In the future sessions, just want to be kind of showcase what we're having next, hopefully in partnership with many of you. There's going to be other organizations that join into this movement. We could be talking about, we definitely want to dive deeper into global examples of low-cost regenerative villages in action today, as Canada is limited on people and innovation so far. There's a huge wave of villages being financed by digital currencies such as crypto and traditional fiat funding, and you can blend them in as part of your fundraising efforts. We have platforms to matchmake individuals with groups and landowners in Canada beyond. And last but not least, a detailed review of all the off-grid living infrastructure available today and can give you exclusive insight on what's being produced for the home of tomorrow. So if there's anything else you'd like for us to cover, please let us know in the comments, in the chat. This session, like I said, is going to be recorded and posted on YouTube. We'll email you the link and various resources for these future sessions. Okay, I'm just going to quickly launch a poll here just to see who you guys are. So I just launched a poll. Let me know if you see this. So who are you? I get to see all these poll results, and then I'll post them here in a couple minutes while I read this introduction. All right. So what if we could live in a $25,000 home instead of a $1 million home? I've asked myself this question for over a decade. I'm happy to say that the $25,000 home is here for real. You can go in a $10,000 home. You can go in a $100,000 home. It's all sorts of better than what it is today in the mainstream. So how many of you are living now with this radical affordability? Let us know in the chat. If you are living radically and affordable, let us know in the chat. You can give me a big WIN, win, in the chat if you are winning on this. Yes, we got a win. We got one person winning. And how many of you want to live this way? Give me a hell yes, HELLYES, if you want to live that way. Hell yes. Okay, we got one win so far and a bunch of hell yeses. So YouTube is literally the only source of housing innovation. And it's funny, I'm sure you guys patrol and get stuck in doom scrolling YouTube of all the awesomeness. And content creators have documented the thousands of case studies. It's just unbelievable. Every single day, I just see all this as you do. The stats are crazy, right? Globally, there's 150 million people homeless, 1.7 billion without adequate shelter. And in North America, we got half of us that are house poor. So we can barely keep up with the bills and afford these ridiculously old, expensive boxes. So we could crush the cost of living. For example, in your community, just as an example, in a small community, 100 families move into a $50,000 home. Let's just say $50,000 home from the average home price of $750,000. This could equate to a minimum $50 million unlocked from the banks to be potentially circulated back into the community. Now that's some serious disruption. It's more than I want to go and live in an affordable home. It's like, wow, this is a game changer for capital to flow back into our communities for other things like food security, like climate action, like all these other things that you want to do in life, experiences, you name it. So affordability is not the only factor. The ultimate goal, in my mind at least, is regenerative living. The term regenerative describes processes that restore, renew, or revitalize the health of individuals, communities, and ecosystems. Regenerative living is the system thinking that mimic natural ecosystems for returning energy to usable forms, creating a resilient and equitable life. It integrates the needs of society with the integrity of nature. So I think we can kind of agree on the premise of doing more than what we've got right now and building these boxes. But I've definitely taken a deeper dive into regenerative design and regenerative living, and I'll kind of explain a little bit of my journey. So whereas the highest aim of sustainability is to satisfy fundamental human needs today without compromising future generations, the goal of regenerative living is to develop restorative systems that are dynamic, resilient, and adaptive, and are both beneficial for both humans and other species. So to get to this goal, I suggest the following 5 steps, and quite often people get stuck in this step 2, this act. So you've read all about this, you've watched the YouTube videos, you're sitting in your apartment and you're like, how do I get to act? And that's what we're focused on today. It's just a start. The tools that allow you to act. In the next sessions over winter, we can tackle the build, and you can visit in person or watch the live stream of Grow in the spring of 24. So here's hoping that we have a fantastic season ahead. I'm just going to check the polls and poll here. I'm going to just share the poll here. We've got 53% curious individuals, 30% eager villagers, 6% landowners with assets, a group of peeps, and industry pros. Okay, great. Good to know the audience here. Okay. So how many of you are living in big cities right now? Let me know in the chat with the word traffic in capital. And how many are living in the rural world with the word nature? So use nature or traffic. That's a nature, traffic, nature, traffic, nature, nature, nature. Yeah, nature's winning. Traffic, nature. Oh, yeah. So this photo in that slide right now is where I live. I live in Caslow. And did you know 98% of Canada is rural and very few people live here? We've got a lot of land spread out. That is my message. You can read the rest of the message on the screen there. It's pretty interesting to see what's happening. With rural, we just got connected with internet called Starlink. Nature, nature, nature. Yeah, for nature. Right on. So I just want to take some time and introduce some of my key projects. These are just the ones I work on. you can find so many more on YouTube or a website that I check out, and I'm part of called housinginnovation.co. Brian, if you could put that in the chat, housinginnovation.co. It does a really good job of kind of showcasing all sorts of homes and developers and people that are trying different things that are low cost, especially low cost. But I'm just going to talk about a few of my projects right now. One of the companies I own is called Regen Villages. So Regen Villages builds large-scale regenerative and resilient communities with the integrated life support systems of food, water, energy, and waste and resource management. So these new communities are connected to each other in existing communities and smart bioregions with a village platform. So we're trying to create a border-free autonomous system to optimize and improve our lives. So right now, we're primarily working on the software to manage the design and planning of these villages. So like, imagine raising our kids in this village who understand the story arc of life and the nature of circularity. Our average greenfield project is 25 hectares of all natural homes for 400 families, but 2/3 are open space, water capture, high yield organic food production, controlled environment, farming, waste and resource management, and energy generation, creating a truly regenerative neighborhood. The problem is that these are large scale, hundreds of billions of dollars in effort over many years. They're mostly in the peri-urban environment. We can start with something much smaller and lower cost, and that's our focus for today. This is a diagram of our Regen Village infrastructure. Some of you have built eco-villages before will appreciate it. I hope with this lens of regenerative natural resource flows, we can fully understand that the output of one system becomes the input of another. This flow can create relationships that were previously siloed pieces that you'll find in the community you live in right now. The reason why things are so dysfunctional is because they're not connected to each other. And that's where we're going with city development, and we can go with even low-cost regenerative villages. So I am a co-owner and manage GeoShip, where I spend most of my time doing business development. I'm just going to let you see this sweet little village. Sorry if it's a little chunky or choppy, but you can kind of flow through on a rendering of a GeoShip village. I do business development for the company. Our bioceramic domes are combined with a digital space for communities to form and democratize the village design and building process. Villages are distinct from housing developments in that they're cultural places designed to build with community participation. Our company is continuing towards its Earthshot to make the best home on Earth the most affordable one, and scale manufacturing to 1 million ceramic domes per year. We have a prototype, and we're the world's first ceramic dome, which I'll show you right here on the next slide. You can see here, this is just a sweet little teaser video. I'm not going to do the audio on this. We're talking about like $75 a square foot, just to start, with benefits that no one can get today, even if you get a home that's $2,000 a square foot. The whole home is bioceramic. There's no metal, no wood, no concrete, no toxic materials. It's almost the same chemical composition as bone. We're reducing the carbon footprint of housing by 95% with climate-proof homes designed to last 500 years. That's just slightly longer than the average tree. You can see our prototype in this video, or actually just search on YouTube and Instagram. We're all over. We are currently finishing the fundraising round to build our manufacturing facilities to deliver on pre-orders next year. Ceramic domes are manufactured in automated factories, 50 to 100 times faster than any traditional building. Maybe you want to build your own home in your village, but for the vast majority of people, this is not an option, and it's far too expensive to hire humans to build a traditional house, which is one of the many reasons why we have a housing crisis. Okay. Oh. Going to. There we go. Awesome. So where GeoShip is transitioning into a multi-stakeholder cooperative, customers and nature stewards will own up to 50% of the company. I know sounds crazy, but hey, it's true. We're trying. This combination of a revolutionary housing product, business model, and ownership structure enables deep impact on a level never seen before. Chances are the home you live in right now, even if it's brand new, is the same type of building we've had for hundreds of years. This is a completely new type of home philosophy and vision. Yes, it's disaster proof, fire, flood, earthquake, hurricane, and climate resilient. You can check out more on GeoShip. That is enough about my stuff. I just want to kind of focus a little bit on the people that I treasure in the regenerative world. Of course, my partners, Morgan and James. Morgan from GeoShip, James from who's a godfather of regenerative living in my mind from Regen Villages. Cynthia Tina, she's from Community Finders. If you want to go check out awesome villages around the world, she's got a tour coming up to Costa Rica. She's doing tours to all sorts of cool places to check out. Wonderful woman. Nadina Gale from the Internet of Nature. Jamie Miller is a top biomimicry expert in Canada. Nadina and Jamie are my top 2 Canadian regeneration stars up and coming. Mary Oxman, if you've seen her on YouTube, just get interviewed by Lex Friedman. It's an unbelievable thing. So check out these people for everything regenerative. Just a selection of the companies I support. CoHo Network is a member-owned network of conscious co-living communities. Look them up, become a member. So for a monthly cost of a studio apartment, you can have the freedom to live, work, and travel between a network of evolving regenerative communities while gaining equity in them. So it's tokenized, meaning members have a share of the ownership in a network of co-living communities. Really, really cool. CoHo is one of a few of these organizations that are taking off. Canadian Off-Grid Depot, you'll hear everything from Brian, including energy, water, heating, appliances, everything that can help you get set up. Intershelter and its Canadian distributor Novodome. You'll hear me talk a lot about the 10K home. This one sets up in 4 hours with 2 people. It's modular. Yeah, it's made out of fiberglass, but hell, it's bomb-proof, and it's a really good thing to step into at this moment. You can upgrade down the road to the GeoShip if we come up. Connect with me on all of this detail and help you with deals and designs of your village build. I just want to touch on one last thing before I go. Key component of village development. Brian's going to talk a bunch about it. Many are focused on the social contract and collaboration process of communities. There's some apps out there, just like Revillager, built on Vancouver Island. I practice what I call futurescaping, which is kind of future scenario building with groups. It's a fun activity where teams to create so many different positive outcomes. Yeah, check out Revillager. We're done with social media. Social media was not made for community development. It wasn't made for anything, frankly. It's expired a long time ago. There's some really good platforms, Revillager, civic engagement platforms out there. Search for that, and you'll find ways in which you can kind of co-create and collaborate within your groups. All your data is secure, encrypted, never sold to advertisers. You can build meaningful connection through trade, discussion, and events. Empower your local communities through learning, governance, and collaboration. Grow your relationships emotionally, supporting each other, resolving conflict. Now, nothing compares to doing it one-to-one in person, and Brian will talk a little bit about that for sure, but nice tools will help you along the way. So how do you, if your friends and your children want to live, we can have an exponential future of abundance if we take the leap together. Just start today. We'll get some more questions. I'm sure there's a few of these. Thank you for posting Novodome and GeoShip and all of these things here, Brian. If any questions, we'll leave it to the end, and you can check out my blog at smartvillage.ca. Yeah, and I will jump on that slide afterwards. So we are going to go right into Noam. So bounce to you, Noam, and I'm going to spotlight you.
All right, fantastic. Jean-Marc, this sounds amazing, and thank you for having me here to talk a little bit about how the social and legal and financial structures of co-ownership can help actualize these visions. Because unfortunately, many of the Canadian housing laws and real estate laws do not, um, easily lend themselves to these type of affordable communities. And so we need to do what I like to refer to as a housing hack and work together to acquire properties that we can then turn into these communities. And to that end, we founded CoHo BC, which is an initiative across the province that works to promote co-ownership as a viable and valuable housing option for people in the province, and to provide the resources and professional support to assist groups going through the co-ownership process to make sure you're set up for success and have addressed all the real estate questions, the financial questions, the legal questions, the social questions, to make sure that your community is viable and is going to last for a long time, and can can deal with the comings and goings of members, etc. So our organization also works to assist in the creation of co-ownership groups through a dating pool and a chance to meet other like-minded individuals or families to create co-ownership buyer groups. And we work on the resale of shared property interests to other potential buyers and partners, putting together all those pieces, explaining the concepts, and showing that you can get in, and when it's time, you can move on. Um, well, So who are we? We're a collection of professionals, realtors such as myself and Brian, who you'll hear from later, lawyers such as Rick Ledding, who you hear from, builders like Jean-Marc, financial institutions, architects, mediators, basically all the professionals you would need with experience and expertise in collective housing and co-ownership to guide you through the process. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can use the experts and you can set yourself up for success. Um, I'd like to think that this is some brilliant idea that we came up with on our own, but of course it's not. First off, people have been co-buying properties and making micro communities for eternity. In fact, that was how land was owned in the ancient times. Families have been doing it, co-ops have been doing it, eco-villages have been doing it for a long time. And with the growth in real estate prices and the unfortunate growth in social isolation, we're seeing a real resurgence in co-ownership as a pathway. And here you see some groups from across Canada, the United States, Australia, and there's groups in New Zealand and Europe. So really, this is a movement everywhere that prices have gotten under control, that isolation has gotten out of control, and just where people are looking for better, as I said, regenerative, supportive, communal housing. Who am I? Again, my name is Noam Dolgin. I'm a realtor here in Metro Vancouver, specializing in co-ownership and outside the box real estate thinking, like Jean-Marc said. And you can learn more about me if you Google me after. You'll also hear from Brian Horwitz, another realtor with this expertise, who has the specialty in co-ownership and particularly in acreages, agricultural and rural properties, as well as urban properties on Vancouver Island. I mentioned that co-ownership is nothing new, right? Before 1966, there was no Strata Act in BC. So if you wanted to get a portion of real estate, you had to co-own. In the 60s and 70s, we saw a real growth in ownership co-ops across the province. In the 90s to present, we're seeing co-housing grow as a co-development model. They usually use a stratified final product, but they go through a co-ownership phase early on. And again, families, investors, vacation properties, these are all examples of co-ownership. And of course, all condos, duplexes, townhomes, these are all co-ownership. That the whole point of the Strata Act was to create a pathway to co-ownership. Unfortunately, because those became the most affordable options for everybody, they stopped being affordable. It's the irony of the situation. So we're back to looking at other ways to bring co-ownership back, to bring back the affordability that condos were supposed to create. And unfortunately, except for the examples of co-housing and some of the other specialty communities, most of our strata units are not built for community. They're not built for sustainability. They're not built with environmental longevity. They're just built to sell a home and make a bunch of money. So why would you co-own? There are many advantages to co-ownership. Build community and mutual support systems, get more for your money.
Right, mom fell asleep
Oh,
after dinner,
if you're,
sitting in the chair while Greg was still
can
eating.
we,
And then
can
woke
we
up and took
mute
the
whoever's
coffee.
speaking? If you can make sure you're muted. Brian, can you mute all? All right, great. Live in otherwise unavailable locations, right? Most of our province is not zoned for multifamily. The rural areas don't traditionally allow for multifamily development. Most of our cities are primarily zoned for single family neighborhoods. So this allows you to access parts of the province that you wouldn't otherwise access. You get to know your neighbors before you buy, you share resources, you can build higher quality housing or housing types that are otherwise not available, like these geoships. There are financial synergies. So by coming together, you can, two people who can't, let's say two is a simple model, or even 200 people who couldn't afford housing on their own could come together, and through that collaboration can make something happen. And I really see this as a triple bottom line sustainability initiative. It's socially, fiscally, and environmentally the responsible pathway forward. Who do we see co-owning? We see folks in all generations. We see families co-owning together. We see individuals, young families, friends, first-time home buyers trying to get into the market, downsizers and seniors, investors, folks looking for more sustainable solutions, trying to live closer to the land, folks who are worried about climate and the impending climate disaster, folks who are feeling socially isolated. And so really anyone who can think collaboratively and outside the box can usually see that co-ownership can help. They just are often scared of the process, and they often have an uncle or a friend who tells them, oh, don't own with somebody else. But again, that's why CoHo is here, and lawyers like Rick Letting to kind of help set you up so that you're prepared, and you've thought about all the worst case scenarios and all the best case scenarios in advance, and you plan for them and you deal with them so that they never, the best ones come to be and the worst ones never do. So what co-ownership can look like really depends on you. We have groups doing communal living, sharing a house, townhouse, or condo. We have groups co-owning properties with multiple dwellings on them. So, a lot of this is the more traditional housing that's out there. So for friends buying a traditional home, or a lot of our province is zoned for multiple houses on one dwelling, or there are historic multiple houses on one dwelling. But then we also see more creative pathways, land-based businesses such as farms, working in combination with homeowners. We see co-ops, we see these low-cost prefab communities and eco-villages. Really, it can be anything. If you have a vision and we can find a pathway to make it work, then we can support you through that process. How much you share is up to you, whether you're looking just to share the land and ownership, but everyone has their own private living space and separation, or whether you want to live entirely collectively, or what most people are doing is somewhere in between, where they have their own space and they also have collective spaces, shared resources, and some sort of collective events, collective vision that they're trying to actualize. This is a more popular thing than many people realize, although maybe the turnout of this event shows us just how popular this is. 51% of Canadians in a recent survey said they're open to co-ownership as a pathway to home ownership of some capacity and of creating sustainable housing for themselves, with numbers higher in the younger generations, where really they feel like they can't afford anything else, and they're more likely to be inclined to alternative housing styles, kind of done with the single family home suburbia model. But even in the 55 plus boomer generation, we're seeing a lot of folks looking at this as a pathway to community and support. There are, of course, challenges that come with co-ownership, and that's why you bring on someone, like a lawyer and an expert. Those challenges are primarily around financing and mortgage, and how you structure the property is going to be a big part of that. Now, if you can bring your ownership prices down to $10,000, $20,000, $50,000, maybe you can avoid some of those concerns. But even at $50,000, not everyone has that in their pocket. So you want to make sure you have a pathway for people to be able to, to get some sort of financing. Exit strategy, you don't want to put your money into something without knowing that, if you want to move or if someone dies or divorces, you've got a pathway out. You want to have a social plan for ongoing disagreements around, how to sustain your project, how to maintain it, noise, who's responsible for what. And one of the biggest challenges, of course, is finding the right partners, which is why I'm excited that there's an upcoming session on partner finding. But we find is that a well thought through partnership agreement and a really deliberative process where you ask the questions in advance and you think and you meet and you talk and you put everything on the table, your needs, your deal breakers, your weird quirks, your long-term vision, really allows you and your partners to set you up for success. So to go into more details on some of these things, some of these challenges, financing being a big one, right? So under Canadian law, if you do have a mortgage, all owners must be on the mortgage and could be held jointly responsible. But again, there are some tricks and legal structures to somewhat limit that liability. We encourage folks to do this kind of stuff with a strong down payment and strong underlying value in the land. I mentioned the federal synergy stuff, and certain products now do exist through the credit unions and other banks for co-ownership and to really help facilitate that. But one of the big questions you have to ask right up front is, what is your legal structure and how will that affect your financing pathways? So co-ops versus corporations versus partnerships or tenancies in common, each has their own pros and cons when it comes to financing, when it comes to resale, and a few other pieces. Exit strategies similarly are unique for every group. Oftentimes, especially in smaller co-ownership where 3 to 2 to 6 or 8 people, we often suggest a lockout period up front. And then when one party wants to sell, it begins a 3-part process where the remaining partners have the right to buy out the leaving partners, or both parties attempt to find a third party to replace the leaving partner. And this is one of the really exciting things that we've been doing here at CoHo, is in reselling shares in existing co-ownership properties. And if it's part of your vision, if especially for the smaller communities, if stages 1 or 2 aren't possible, so oftentimes you'll have an agreement to sell the property outright. So this creates a pathway where the remaining partner has a pathway to stay, and the departing partners have pathways that they know they can move on when the time comes. A lot of our larger communities, will keep waiting lists, and we'll create some sort of maybe funding, financing model so they can buy people out when they need to without having to force a sale on the property. Because you don't want one person to force 20 to have to sell off their property. So again, this is all going to be very unique for every group, and Richard will talk about this more in a moment. The biggest piece of this is going to be your legal agreement or your co-ownership agreement or partnership agreement. And there's a lot of stuff that goes into that agreement that Richard will talk about. Again, your financing, your percentage ownership, what stake you have in the property, your structure of ownership, right? Tenancy in common, co-op, corporation, long-term lease. All these have different advantages, disadvantages. Your purpose and your vision being key. So this is not all about the legal stuff, right? It's also about your community goals. Will there be rentals? How you structure that? How will you use the land for farming, for business? What kind of social events you will have? What kind of policies you'll have around, sustainability, eco stuff, noise, all sorts of different things that go into this. And Brian will talk more about that. Property management, how will it be managed? Everyone's respective roles and responsibilities, your shared resources and expenses, your rules, delinquency, what happens if one of your partners doesn't follow through with their obligations, your social framework, how are you going to make decisions? Is it going to be consensus based? Or are you going to have some sort of majority or supermajority system? How are you going to have communications and meetings? How will you deal with conflicts? And as I mentioned, exit strategies. So at this point, I'm going to hand the floor over to Rick Letting to talk in a little more detail about all this stuff that I just ran through. And then I'll come back in a little bit to close this section up. Rick, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thanks very much for inviting me, folks. I appreciate that. Jean-Marc, I think you've disabled my video, which people often do. It's So anyway, I wanted to kind of expand on some of the things here that Noam has basically talked about. So the first thing I want to talk about is, and by the way, I don't want to get into too much into the weeds here on the legal, because it tends to make people fall asleep. So I don't want you folks falling asleep out there. So I'm going to hit kind of some high points, and I'm going to draw on some of my experience with quite a number of different co-housing or co-owning type arrangements. Now, by the way, all of these terms out there, like if you go in and you talk to a lawyer and you say, hey, I want to set up a co-housing group or whatever, there's no defined term of what that means. So the lawyer will probably say to you, okay, well, let's sit down and let's talk about what you're really talking about here, so we make sure we understand. So Noam basically sent over an email to me that he had basically sent out to someone, basically outlining the various types of entities that can be used for co-ownership. There's 10 of them. 10 of them. Now, the reality is that you can probably boil this down to probably a few that you're probably going to consider, probably one of two or three. If you're going to do a larger project where you're actually going to build out a project and do what we call a co-housing group, where you're basically going to stratify the units ultimately down the road, and you're going to own as co-owners within this strata corporation. I mean, that's one structure, and it's a very popular structure with respect to multi-family kind of arrangements. And the reason why it's very popular is that it's easy to get financing on the strata units at the end of the day. And with the housing prices, as Noam has indicated, they're so high that people typically need to get financing for something like that. The other two situations, or the other two entities that you're probably going to use if you're in a smaller group, of 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people, doesn't usually get too much bigger than that, is you're probably going to do some kind of a joint venture or co-ownership agreement or a corporation. Now, you hear the terms joint venture and co-ownership. They typically are the same thing. The differentiation that lawyers typically make is that a joint venture to a lawyer usually means there's some financial aspect to it. It's like a bunch of investors getting together and trying to make a bunch of money. So you call it a joint venture. We usually use the co-ownership arrangement in a situation like you folks are probably going to get into, where you're probably wanting to build a place where you're going to live together, and it's got a little less of a financial aspect to it, as opposed to just a living and a communal aspect. Now, by the way, I've got an old saying that it's all about the money. And typically, I know that everything you guys are probably thinking about doing maybe is not, you try to think that it's not about the money, but money is a very important factor in everything that you do. And you got to be able to afford it. You got to be able to have enough revenue to basically maintain these properties. So it is a factor you have to take into account. So the two entities that we typically see in these smaller ventures is a corporation or a joint venture. Now, what's the difference? Well, the difference is this. A corporation is actually an entity. It's a person. Just like you are, it's a person. Has to file a tax return. It basically has limited liability because the liabilities stop at the corporation. So if the corporation gets sued, the shareholders are not liable for the obligations of the corporation unless they personally guaranteed those obligations. So lawyers love corporations because we like to limit our clients' liability. The joint venture, by the very nature of it, is you're all owners. So you're all liable for anything that happens with respect to the property. So it's very important to make sure that you understand that, because, you know, if you're looking for limited liability, if you don't want any future liabilities, you gotta take that into account. So I basically jotted down what I consider to be about the top 6 or 7 issues that you should consider when you're basically looking to structure your deal. But remember, if you're going to go structure your deal, don't try to sit in your bed on your dining room table with a bunch of people and think that you're going to basically be acting like a bunch of lawyers and you're going to basically structure the deal and so on and so on. You know, the important thing for you to do is to go and counsel with a lawyer and have the lawyer basically structure the deal with your goals in mind, because different goals will lead to different types of structures. But here are some of the things that you got to think about. Financing. If you basically go basically set up a co-op, for example, which is under the Co-op Act, which was set up in, like, the Co-op Act came into force, I think, in around 1980 or so. And in my 42 years of practicing law, I've never set up a co-op. So these co-ops were supposed to be set up to basically create these cooperative type arrangements, but nobody does them. And the reason why nobody does them is you can't finance them. You go to a bank and you say, yeah, I'm buying this co-op unit. Can you give me some financing? The bank looks at you with a strange look because they can't figure out a way to finance it. They can't register their mortgage anywhere. So they just basically say, no, we're not going to give you financing. So financing is an important issue in some occasions. If you're doing a low enough cost deal like that Jean-Marc is basically suggesting, of doing a $50,000 deal, well, you probably don't need financing for that, and it's ideal. The financing issue goes out the door. The second thing is residential tenancy issues. People often sometimes forget about this because, for example, if you're going to go buy a building, maybe a 6-unit building, and you're going to basically wanting to have 6 people, 6 of your best friends, and you move into the place, well, you got to get the existing tenants out of there. And the Residential Tenancy Act is a minefield. It's a very difficult act to basically use, because there's very few options that you can use to basically get tenants out. So you have to have that well planned if you're going to basically take over the property and live on it. Number 3, doesn't come up very often, but there's a Securities Act out there in British Columbia. And it basically restricts the ability of people to just go sell their securities. By the way, the definition of a security is a wide-ranging thing. Your kitchen sink might be a security. So if you're going out and selling shares in a company, that is basically a security. You got to make sure you comply with the Securities Act. So again, you're going to need to counsel with your lawyer on that. Liability issues. I just talked about that. You know, you got to figure out what are going to be your liabilities within this entity that you basically set up. Complexity of agreements and documents. You know, if you, for example, set up something that is very much a complex kind of structure, well, you can rest assured that you're going to have high cost and high complexity in your documents. We generally try to keep our documentation relatively simple, but to do any kind of a good co-ownership or joint venture agreement, if you set up all the mechanics for closing arrangements in the event of sales and things like that, if your agreement is short of 30 pages, you probably don't have an adequate agreement. I know that you people are probably glazing over and thinking, 30 pages? What is this guy talking about? I don't want 30 pages. But you need those 30 pages to basically fulfill the necessities. So don't get upset if you see if you have a lawyer basically provide you with such a long document. I often get clients who will come in and they'll basically say, I want the pages, I want 5 pages for the agreement. Get it down to 5 pages. So I give them a 30-page agreement, and then I start going through it and say, okay, we got a death provision here. What happens if somebody dies? Well, Do you care whether somebody dies? Oh yeah, we care. Yeah. Do you care whether the heirs or executors basically are involved in the deal here with you? Yeah, we care about that. Well, we can't take it out then. Okay, yeah, I can't take that out. And if once I go through those 30 pages, I might peel off a few pages, but not much more because you need it. Income tax. You gotta basically figure out with income tax. Like for example, if you have a corporation set up and then say the corporation leases the property to you and you then have a right to occupy the property, is that your principal residence? Say you got 6 or 8 people living in a building and they're all under that arrangement. Is that a principal residence? So when you sell your interest down the road, do you basically get a tax exemption for it being a principal residence? You got to go talk to your accountant about that. Make sure you get that right. Could be important. So as far as the items that Noam has covered here in the co-ownership agreements, he's done a very good job of hitting kind of the major points here. One that he didn't mention was death, like what happens if in the event somebody dies. And in situations like this where you've got people living together, oftentimes people are fine with the immediate family or whatever continuing to live in the property, but you gotta basically make sure that you take care of that provision, because if somebody's a single person, for example, and they die, and all of a sudden their long lost relative or whatever is going to be taking over this interest in this, are you happy with that? Or you may not be happy with that. So you gotta direct your mind to that. The one thing that I notice as well in many joint venture or co-ownership agreements is that they have a triggering event for when people want to leave the joint venture or the co-ownership arrangement. However, very rarely do they take into account the situation where you've got a problem. You've got a problem person, somebody who's disrupting the whole group, and you want to get rid of them. Well, how do you get rid of them? Generally speaking, what I see is that there'll be an option in favor of if all the other co-owners basically vote to basically buy that one disrupting party out, they can do it, but they have to do it at fair market value. And I've actually got one of those going on right now, where we've got a disrupting party, and the parties are going to exercise their rights under that option arrangement to get rid of the problem person. It doesn't happen very often, but it can happen. Conflict resolution. That's an interesting topic. When I did my first co-housing deal, which was like 25 years ago, so there was the project manager for the group basically came in, and we were talking about the shareholders agreement. She says, well, we make all our decisions unanimously. I says, what? Unanimously? You can't do that. Like, no lawyer would agree with that. They says, well, we're not actually unanimous, but at least we get consensus. So we at least talk it out till nobody objects to whatever decision we're making. So that's an example of how people make decisions. But the decision making is critical in these deals, because it's the essence of your whole arrangement, is that how do you folks coexist? And how do you basically move forward on issues? Because you're going to need to make decisions at some point along the way. Outside of that, I think that Noam has done a very good job here of basically kind of capsulizing. There's always lots to talk about in these agreements, because one thing that you have to remember in these co-ownership or joint venture agreements, what you put in this agreement is only limited by your imagination. You can put in whatever you like. It's whatever the folks will agree to. So it can be pretty wide a field as to what you'll see in these agreements. There's not just a select number of things that you see in every agreement. It'll move around from agreement to agreement. So thank you very much for listening.
That's great, Rick. Thanks so much. You maybe try to hit your video again so you can say hi. You are a co-host, and you should be able to. There you go. Look, there's Rich.
Yeah, yeah.
There
My
you
wife turns
go.
on my video all the time.
Good to put a
So-
face to that amazing information. Thanks so much, Rick. Yeah, go ahead.
So yeah, so just to kind of finish up, so as Rick saying, there's a lot to think about in advance of co-ownership, which is why preparation is essential and why CoHo BC is here to help you. And just we've done a lot of different diverse projects over the last number of years, from 2 people buying a house up to 8 folks buying cottages on 2 lots, and we're working now with a number of eco villages and sustainability stuff. I won't dwell on this too much, but you will find a lot of resources on our website, cohobc.com/resources, a lot of past videos of speakers, lawyers, financiers, mediators, co-owners talking on our YouTube channel. If you're looking for a small scale partnership, we have a whole matchmaking set up, an online survey, online classifieds, online events, in-person events, so you can connect to that. And you can also just reach out to us directly and we can talk about your situation and how we can help get you set up. Our upcoming events, we have a collaborative real estate investment thing coming up. We have an East Vancouver shareable homes tour. Oh, there's an E missing there. Anyways, and we have our general info session of what is real estate co-ownership, where we go into much more depth of what you heard today. So thank you again, Jean-Marc, for inviting us, and thank you everyone who is here today. Mine and Brian, who you hear from in a moment, contact information is up here if you want to reach out to us, and Rick is information here as well. And I'll be here at the end for questions.
Yes. Yeah, thanks so much. We have some time for questions if anybody has any at this moment. Otherwise, we'll jump right into Brian. Just kind of post your question in the chat. We'll ask Noam, Rick, soon Brian. I'm sure you have some more questions after Brian. Just gonna quickly launch another poll. So it's just our village poll here, what the challenges are now that you've seen a lot of the pros and cons of different entities, agreements, the history of co-ownership in BC. Thank you so much, Noam, for that. I just got to know CoHo BC a few months ago, and I was super happy to have met you guys. For a while, I was just throwing up whichever lawyer I could come across to chat about these things that are in fact legal. It just wasn't mainstream, and it really took the pandemic to kind of thrust it into high gear. Of course, compounding crises, housing and climate. So we're just getting this poll in now. Thank you for doing this, and I'll show the results in a little bit. Do we have any questions? Otherwise, we'll just kind of jump right into Brian here and just kind of go in with QA as we go along. Okay, great. Thanks, Brian. Okay, you're on mute.
Okay, all right, good to be here. Well, all the information coming this way has been great so far, and it's a pleasure for me to talk about what I'm going to talk about. So, anyways, just to I've been listening and making notes, and collaborative endeavors are highly involved. And in my experience, personal and professional, some people are very a little bit reluctant to go walk right into a lawyer's office to get educated. So when it comes to being a little bit more confident and educated in what it all takes, I mean, for one, we're here and we're learning, but for two, working with professionals such as us here on the panel is a great opportunity to get educated and to learn the steps required in order to be successful and to thrive as co-owners. And speaking to that, it all begins with self-reflection. And just wanted to double check that you can see my screen here. That's good. Yep. So There's two major components in sharing real estate: the legal agreement and the social agreement. And out of personal and professional experience, the glue is the social agreement. Something that Rick just said. How do folks coexist on the land? So the legal structure is imperative, but that glue, that social cohesion, really is integral to the success. So, the beginnings of everything is to just check in with yourself and, ask these questions. It might seem a little bit silly to ask yourself questions, but when you actually do ask these questions of your personal goals and what your strengths are, what your deal breakers are, what your expectations are, your financial capacity, your debt load, those types of inner questions, you get a good sense of where you are at that on a social level. And once you get through those questions, it's time to have initial conversations with potential collaborators. And right now we're in a position where people are actually open to collaborating with people they don't know. And actually, it's kind of marvelous because when you move into a strata right now, you don't know your neighbor. And then you move in and your neighbor might behave in a way that you wouldn't have bought that place had you known how they were going to act. So, we have, CoHo BC, we have a classified section, we have matchmaking events. We're connecting tonight, and we're going to connect again, bringing people together. But it's wonderful to see strangers come together who share a lot of social values, and have these in-depth conversations to explore the social cohesion. Because in the end, that really is, like I said, the glue for a group to be successful in order to thrive. Whether it's two parties coming together or 20 parties coming together, there's a lot of similarities in those initial discussions. Working in collaborative real estate for a couple of years now has really allowed me to streamline my process on how I work with my clients in getting clear on the appropriate steps to take. So when people who've spoken with us, they're at that point, once we've gone through our master resource and had those initial conversations, that there's a lot of confidence with the group when they go to the lawyer. So there's less intimidation there at that point. And that even creates a lot more success in regard moving forward with the legal agreement, because a lot of the understanding of the general terms of the agreement are in place. So I always like to focus on needs, because people want a lot in life, and that's fine. There's a lot of things I want that I can't have because of my financial limitations. But needs is integral to the success of all types of aspects of our life, especially when it comes to sharing real estate. So yes, some people might want 3 bathrooms, but what do you actually need? Some people might want a workshop, but what does everyone actually need? So it's important at the initial conversations to talk about your needs and your wants, your deal breakers. Now, between these 3 components, you really do get a good feel for the potential of social cohesion within that group. Going through your deal breakers. A lot of people I work with want kids. Some people don't. I love talking about elephants in the room. Talk about COVID. Talk about politics. Talk about those sensitive issues. Have those conversations. Agree to disagree if need be. One thing to also realize in these initial conversations is the social framework. And in my experience, when groups talk about wants, that's where you really get clear on a social framework, what people are aiming for. What's the vision of that group? What's the long-term vision? Affordability, social support. Because at the end of the day, that social framework really does bind that legal agreement at the end of the process when a group is ready to commit to this type of endeavor. So your social framework, it doesn't need to be 30 pages. It just needs to be a simple paragraph or two, outlining the shared values within the group and the purpose of the collaboration, considering topics like community, privacy, sustainability, affordability, what types of social support mechanisms are in place, shared resources, some people want to share a car, self-sufficiency, do people want to grow food, and the respect for the land and the occupants and more. Another topic to consider as well too, in the beginnings of the exploring potential with people of a like mind, are those initial economic questions. Will there be a need for a mortgage? And if so, what can each party afford? Are each collaborators able to, show up and pay their fair share of monthly expenses? These types of endeavors are very personal. They're almost the exact opposite of traditional real estate deals where everyone's showing their cards. So it's actually wonderful when we're working with sellers, conscious sellers and landholders who are willing to share portions of their property. And we have these roundtable discussions where the vendor and buyers are meeting together, going through these initial conversations, and building a relationship. And, in my experience, I've come to realize that sometimes when you don't have history with certain people of a like mind, you're almost better off starting fresh on a clean slate. So that once you get past stage 2 in our master resource, we work in towards governance. And, we're speaking about villages today, and governance is a really big part of for the success of a village to thrive on shared land. And with that, we look at strata and co-op, and we focus on creating mock strata and mock subdividing a property. So there's a lot of systems in place right now that are successful. And I like to look at those systems and templates and paperwork and bring that into co-ownership. Because like Rick was saying, you can set up these agreements any way you want, and that can be daunting with people. But when you connect with experienced professionals, we can provide clarity and advice and resources on what a successful agreement can look like in the particular situation that we are talking about. So with governance, there's meetings, there's, how often is the group planning on meeting? Obviously you want to take notes of the meetings. Decision making, we touch based on that. We always recommend, regardless of your stakehold in the collaboration, that decision making and voting is equal. And that seems to work very well. A big part to focus on is communication and how you communicate. So this is something that villages really need to study. I work with wonderful people who specialize in nonviolent communication, and there's amazing tips on how to communicate your concerns within a group dynamic. And that really is a big part, and something that our villages of the future are focusing on and should be continuing to focus on. For example, if there's someone living next to you that's behaving in a way that you don't like, when it comes to meeting in a group dynamic, instead of telling the group what you don't like, there's different words you can use on what you may need. So it's a wonderful way of supporting the meat and potatoes, the bones, the structure of the social dynamics of a group. And I myself and all of us, we can always keep refining our communication skills, and living in village and community can really help us become better people in that regard. You know, conflict resolution, you know, in the unlikely event that a group can't resolve an issue, there are systems in place where you can bring a mediator on board or an arbitrator on board. Other things to discuss about under governance is compliance. Sometimes groups I work with are doing things that are not by the book. So these are important discussions for groups to go through, when it comes to compliance and zoning and doing things by the book or not by the book, and getting clear on that, especially if you're doing things not by the book, having your backup plan in place. Usually the worst case scenario, which isn't so bad, is a for sale of the property. If you're going the unauthorized way. Ultimately, we want to support villages that are doing things by the book, and we want to get more regional districts and municipalities on board supporting these types of endeavors. And believe you me, they really are showing interest. Lenders are taking us out for lunch, and cities, municipalities are reaching out to us because this isn't the solution, but it is a solution to what is happening in our housing environment. One thing to also look at when it comes to living in village and larger communities are your social obligations. It's a lot easier to manage when you're sharing a rural property with 2 houses, or a house in Vancouver with 2 parties or 3 parties. And when it comes to sharing a 20-acre property, you know, with 20 to 30 dwellings on the property or what have you, there's the social obligations to the collaboration. And that's important for everyone to, you know, be pulling their weight and showing up to support the community. And something to also consider is the failure to fulfill social obligations. And I don't see this too often in legal agreements and social agreements. Primarily, a lot of my work is in smaller collaborations, but we highly recommend that, you know, it's something to talk about and to have a system in place if there's an individual or a party who's not pulling their weight, and you know, what can happen if someone's not fulfilling their social obligations, holding them accountable. It can be in the form of financial penalty. It could be in the form of additional communal responsibilities, and ultimately a forced sale of their share. But honestly, going right back to the beginnings of these initial conversations and spending time on this stage can really provide so much clarity on the cohesion of the group. And sometimes we want it to work so bad, and we really do need to listen to our hearts when it comes to collaborating with people, because you want to be confident in your partners and your shareholders, what have you, that everyone is going to be showing up. So you can avoid the event of someone not fulfilling their social obligations. So once after we get through governance, you know, with groups we talk about forms of ownership, and you know, right now we're focusing on corporate ownership, which is wonderful. Affordable corporate ownership sounds amazing. And then we just keep going through this master resource with our people that we work with. We talk about financing, insurance, the financial structure. There are lots of lenders out there who are supporting shared ownership. There's shared expenses to talk about. So that all gets talked about, and it's all organized. What happens when it comes to someone not fulfilling their financial obligations in the group dynamic? There's systems in place for that. And, you know, the exit resale, we've spoken about that. Noam spoke earlier about the lockout period, selling a share within a corporation. Rick spoke about that. And then estate planning. You know, I always recommend when people are coming together in group dynamic, who's going to be the beneficiary for the collaborators on board. It's always nice to connect with partners, kids, other people who will be living on site. And bouncing right to the end of our master resource here, all things considered, right? The bulk of a co-ownership agreement can be well understood before looking at properties. All properties are different and groups need to be flexible in their vision. And like Rick was saying earlier, anything in an agreement can be changed if all co-owners agree to it. So that sums up my my presentation around the social component of sharing real estate. And it's wonderful to see people coming together and trusting each other and realizing the potential in not being vulnerable, but being open to this new form of owning property and ultimately being secure in your housing. So I can leave it at that, Jean-Marc, and get ready to pass the baton over to Ryan Brooks there, who's specializing in off-grid living, which is a wonderful thing to be looking at these days, sustainability and resilience. I look forward to hearing what you have to say, Ryan.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks so much, Brian. And Brian, we will chime in here with some case studies. I'll just let Ryan introduce himself. Canadian Off-Grid Depot, a core component of this low-cost off-grid village development. If you're interested in off-grid, let us know in chat. Also, any questions here around Brian's presentation, let us know in chat. Yeah, over to you, Ryan. Just give ourselves a little introduction of the work you're doing out east in Canada and how you see things growing in this field.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jean-Marc. So my name's Ryan Brooks. I own Canadian Off-Grid Depot. I specialize in off-grid living. So through an array of products and manufacturers that I work with, I can provide essentially all that you need to live off-grid. So from your power supply to your appliances that will run on low voltage or potentially propane, to your gray water filtration, heating for water or for comfort through wood or propane. And then when it comes to toilet and your black water. So there's a lot going on. The industry is constantly changing. I would say when it comes to the solar industry, that is what changes almost weekly, but for the good. Prices are constantly coming down. New battery technology is advancing constantly, and it's allowing us to expand and have more comforts that we wouldn't have had previously. So more and more people are moving to the off-grid lifestyle and being having those comforts as if they were living in a grid style community.
Yeah. Awesome. And yeah, Ryan, maybe you want to tell us a little bit about your customers right now and what you see in terms of rural experiments here go forward.
Yeah, for sure. So there's a few communities in Northern Ontario that I've been working with in tiny home builders that are looking at this, owning large amounts of land that are not serviced by regular utilities, and then essentially not renting but subletting the portions of the land to individuals who can then own a small portion within this large area and have an off-grid property. So it's becoming quite popular. There's a handful that are popping up, and a lot of these tiny home builders or geodome builders are jumping into this space and working with myself and other people in the off-grid industry to further develop it. So far, there's been two large developments that have gone through up in Northern Ontario, and they've been doing well. I know I've got a lot of customers out in Eastern Canada that are looking into this as well, and with what you guys are doing, hopefully this is going to push forward a lot more into this space.
Yeah, certainly. I think we're seeing that across the board. if anybody followed the statistics of people leaving the big cities throughout the pandemic and real estate changes. We got a bunch of realtors on the call. Obviously, everybody fled into rural acquired land and now are trying to figure out exactly how to piece that together. And the non-traditional way, the traditional way is just not feasible. There's just not enough talent to build the traditional way. And of course, that infrastructure, the traditional infrastructure, is quite expensive. So what you're showcasing and selling is really the key to the future, really decentralizing the entire process. I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir here with this group, but we've seen a noticeable change here. And certainly, Ryan, you can attest to the quality from these manufacturers coming out. It's not an hour goes by where I'm like, get to know about some other component that's amazing. That includes food systems too. If anybody is passionate about food as I am, I'm obsessed about vertical farming. I think that's a key component of our living. It should be included in our communities. There's no reason why we don't have them. I've got a tower garden here sitting next to me, growing all my food. There's a variety of Canadian and global food systems available. But yeah, go check out Off Grid Depot for more. Actually, Ryan, let me know about Live the Off Grid Dream. I think they're on the call as hen. If you're on a call, pipe up still and mention in chat. This is one fantastic off-grid community. I'll post the URL in the chat. They are located in Rock Creek, BC. And there we go. Whoop, whoop. Still in. I just posted the link there. Thank you so much. Whoever is the admin of Living the Off-Grid Dream, you can check them out on YouTube. And if you actually wanted to chat a little bit about it, we could get you up on stage here. It's Leaf. Awesome.
Oh, sure. Yeah, no, I'm happy to chat.
Sure, Leaf. Give it a whirl here. Talk about your project. So good to have you.
Yeah, cool. Should I do the whole thing and turn my camera on?
It's up to you. Whatever you want. This is a great shot too.
I'm relatively presentable at the moment. Let's see what we can do here. Oh, host has stopped it. I'll let someone talk in the intro.
I'll get it. Yeah, you can continue.
So yeah, I can't take credit for being one of the founders, but Jamie and Shelby, about 4 years ago, after COVID really tanked Jamie's previous business, he was 40K in debt, had a pretty significant history as an entrepreneur. He launched 2 successful crowdfunding campaigns for vegan and natural bath and body works, among other things. And but unfortunately was kind of laid low by COVID, as so many were. And he'd always had this dream since childhood, really, of putting together an there's my video. Putting together an off-grid community and, getting back to the land, living healthy, living happy. And so Shelby was also at a point where kind of his health was failing him because he had not been living like a holistic lifestyle. He also owned his own business and was really just like working himself into the ground and not eating well and basically not exercising. I mean, none of the things. And so they decided to go full tilt at this dream and just, write the business plan and use the existing contacts that they had and launch a crowdfunding campaign and basically, just take their skills in business and put them to use, bring them to bear to acquire the property using kind of creative outside of the box funding strategies. And that's essentially what they did. So we started off with glamping, short-term rentals, and people would drive from hours away just to hang out at the off-grid hydrotherapy setup. So saunas, essentially cold plunge. And there's a few business models we teach, but basically I'll wrap up here. But we teach a variety of strategies for how folks can bootstrap land projects, whatever that might be. We do get into some of the financing and just various funding strategies, how to do the business planning, how to approach investors, and all that. So stoked to be here. That's
great. Thanks so much, Leaf. Yeah, encourage you to kind of check out those programs and website. And in chat, let us know of the type of villages that you see out in the wild. Obviously, there's some pretty traditional resources out there. We've got Global Eco Village Network. They've been around for a long while. They showcase a wide variety of Canadian and global villages out there. Not sure if you live on one, please let us know in chat. I've got a few projects on the go in the Kootenays, one near where I live in Caslow, just a half hour north. And it is on a beautiful creek, 28 acres, fantastic owners who are also on the call today. We're working together in partnership with this great group here at CoHo BC to try and figure out exactly how to get this done. So I'm in the trenches as well as you, trying to kind of shape up our regenerative village future. So if you're at all interested in something in the Kootenays, we've got something to dine on for sure. And it's well worth it. One of the things that I've noticed in my years of trying and failing, of doing these off the side of my desk, is really you need these trusted landowners to be your partners. So there are a few more on the call who've reached out to me on email today, said, hey, we're really into it. We live in a slow can, or we live in this part of the world. We really want to feature, host and dive into off-grid or regenerative village development. Having those landowners as partners is critical. It is critical to get a job done. There's a lot of people that say, they'd like to have happen, they don't deliver, or they're not in it as partners. So having them in as partners is really a godsend, and it's paving the way forward. Yeah, and yeah, CoBC. Yeah, there you go. Okay, so good conversation in the chat. What else? I've got next on the hit list, we've got a half hour left. So just going to pass it over to Brian. Brian, if you wanted to chat a little bit about what you're seeing right now, certainly on the coast, on Vancouver Island, the challenges that you're seeing right now are a lot to do with the zoning. There's no shortage of demand. There's no shortage of land, in fact, too, right? So it's really the zoning. Some of the more popular zone-free, let's call it, or experimental areas. Lasqueti Island, that's a good one. If anybody wanted to go check out Lasqueti Island, it's an off-grid paradise. Lots of clusters of co-ownership happening there. I see it up the entire coast. I've been up and down the coast, checking out all sorts of communities. I'm not sure, Brian, if you have any ideas and thoughts on all of this, or anybody else in the audience who've seen cool communities that would be great opportunities, not just zoning, but building codes, of course, are the barrier.
I'd love to speak to that a little bit. Our municipalities, our regional districts are really realizing that this is a critical time and they need to do something. For example, right now on Gabriola Island and some Gulf Islands, there's a standing resolution that says if you're living in an unauthorized dwelling, such as a tiny home, and you have access to clean drinking water and your waste is being managed responsibly, you will not get kicked out of your dwelling. Right there, that standing resolution on letterhead is providing a lot of assurance to property owners that they can potentially take on something like this, right? We don't want to overdevelop our agricultural lands, but there's plenty of room to get more density onto these beautiful rural properties, especially if, like I said, if our waste is being managed responsibly and we have access to clean drinking water. So that can be an issue. However, there are simple solutions. I know people who have above ground waste facility, so their black water goes into a holding tank. Gray water septic is really easy to initiate. And for high and dry properties where there's no water, a lot of these portions of land are a lot more affordable because people always want to have a well and they want to have, turn on the tap and have access to city water. But at the same time, I see a lot of people thriving. In Alberta, I see communities. And here I see individuals in small communities with water cisterns, rainwater harvesting. In the summer months when your tanks run dry, you bring in the water truck. It might not be ideal, but it's a solution, and it gets people into secure, affordable homes. So specifically speaking, there really is opportunity on Lesquiti Island. And I've hit so many roadblocks here in Cowichan, up in Comox, Nanaimo area. There's a lot of districts, and there's a lot of red tape, a lot of different official community plans. And, right now the area is trying to harmonize and modernize the official community plans. But at the same time, I'm starting to realize it's been, and connecting with you, Jean-Marc, and everyone else on board here, Ryan, that there's that mentality, build it and they will come. So yes, Lesquiti is an area, it's an island where there's no building restrictions. And there are some other areas in the province that have no zoning. And where it's almost like the Wild West. But when you go into these areas, you can see how it works. And you can see people living responsibly, sustainability, building resilience, which is huge, our resilience in coming into the future. And that's why I'm so excited about village communities in geodesic domes, because they really are practical structures where that can handle the planet and what's happening in our planet with fire and such and flooding. But yeah, so I just want to touch base on that there are jurisdictions that are allowing unauthorized housing to continue, and accepting that fact and realizing that they can't kick people out of these dwellings. And one thing you hit the nail on the head earlier, Jean-Marc, is working with conscious landholders. And Noam and I were starting to sell portions of interest with landholders, and it's wonderful because a big part of building community in villages or even small collaborations is having a little bit of time to put the pieces together, that social framework and the legal framework, which can take a few months. And right now it's a bit of a buyer's market, and this is actually a really good time to be doing what we're doing and having these conversations and uniting, because there really is power in our numbers uniting.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, Brian. It is, I'd like to talk to our premier on X, formerly known as Twitter, and I just did that this morning. And it's like, housing crisis. It's actually just a communication issue. And so we're part of this movement to showcase the very first villages that are here in this session that are going to propagate all over. And really it is all about a deeper level of collaboration. You see there's a lot of detail here that our presenters have put forward. All of this we're trying to streamline and make it a lot easier so that you can really understand it. But in turn, it will mean good things. In the Kootenays, I just kind of posted a few photos of this project I've got going here near Caslow. We also have a vast quantity of land that is unregulated. And even as I've seen here in chat, there's tiny house builders, and the ones that I spoke about, there's a lot of ways in which you can kind of set up infrastructure that is light and almost, semi-portable, and it kind of bends the rules of these existing regulations. So I encourage you to kind of think beyond the box. Don't let anybody stop you. And when they say, no, this is not allowed, I encourage you to go to your housing authority to actually speak with them about these solutions. They're there representing you. They're well funded by different entities, federal. I just worked with the federal government for a year on a national housing strategy, the National Housing Challenge. Everybody now is thinking differently. You talked to me 5 years ago, and it was a different world. But now they're saying, yeah, okay, let me see what you've got planned. Give me a bit of a plan, and this group here can kind of help you stitch it together so that it's understood and compliant. So yeah, I'm just wondering if anybody else here has questions. We've got lots of chat going on here. Thanks so much. Pam, Sunshine Tiny House is in the house. And hopefully you got wind of that. And we got super. Yeah, I'm gonna just show a bit of our draft process. Again, this is our first session and hopefully a series that we're going to be working. If you have any other organization out there, whether it's like a housing authority or a housing innovator or a company that you've seen on the other side of the planet, let us know, and we can kind of include them in this collective, because truthfully, that's what we have to do. We have to kind of summon them all. I mentioned to you housinginnovation.co. I just posted it again. That has a lot of the technology that's out there today for housing. And then, of course, Ryan has the keys to a lot of the off-grid infrastructure. How are you working around ALR limitations? That's a good question. Brian, you've got your side. I've got my side. ALR is a funny one. You work in certain areas where it's not all farmland, it's just chunks of ALR. And then you don't necessarily have the ALC, the Agricultural Land Commission, coming to you. So the ALR may not be an issue if you're using a very light and semi-portable structure, like a tiny house.
Absolutely, Mark. And there's even Jack Anderson's a green building designer here on Cowichan, and he's spearheaded some projects. He's working on one right now, getting site-specific zoning designations. When it comes to increasing density on ALR lands, there are ways to do it. It's tricky, it's time-consuming, and that's where having a conscious landholder is essential. But there are ways of cluster housing and focusing on food. And he's working on a transitional mechanism where you can, bring in temporary, fifth wheels, tiny homes, what may be, and prove to the municipality, okay, look at this food production. And once they see the food production and see that everyone's living sustainably on the land responsibly, that then they will grant the zoning amendment. There's also land swaps too. There's a lot of land out there that isn't in the ALR that's very fertile. And there's also some ALR lands that aren't so fertile. So there's also land swaps too, where you can have one landholder swap their zoning with another landholder. And that's a wonderful way of, instead of changing the zoning, just do a land swap.
Yeah. Awesome. And we did have a question, obviously, about insurance. Again, this is really depending on the type of infrastructure you put in the ground. Brian, no, I'm not sure if you have any experience on that.
Absolutely. Speaking further to Jack Anderson, he's a remarkable green building designer. All of his projects have underground water cisterns in place. He uses a lot of passive heating and cooling systems. There's gray water recovery systems. There's lots of interesting systems that support what we're trying to create. And when the city sees that, they really do like that. It lessens the burden. Like how to manage your stormwater, and all of that, and bioswales, and it's a whole wonderful thing to look at, working with green building designers that focus on resilience and sustainability. Absolutely.
And I'll just say on the insurance structure, goes back to Rick Letting's presentation about how you really have to structure your legal structure based on your particular situation. So insurance can be a challenge for large groups under a joint venture or tenancy in common. There are some pathways, but they can be harder. But generally, corporate structures become easier to insure, especially if you're able to kind of mimic a more traditional housing model. So if you're able to mimic a rental housing model, something the insurers actually get. But we're starting to work with insurers to try to create more pathways for folks. So, but in general, this is why the process can take some time. You want to make sure all these questions are answered before you commit to a purchase of a property.
Yeah, exactly. There's a question about how viable applying for government grants, in your opinion, for farming operations. There's a flood of grants. And, you know, one of the things, again, I advocate for is, you know, approaching your housing authority as well. If you're looking to kind of mix food with housing into a village, is kind of discussing with your housing authority. They are a society. The Kootenay Lake Innovation Center that I'm part of, it's a society, and it's able to go for the grants. So you can partner with your local innovation center, your local housing authority. You can get letters of support from other societies. Everybody has this issue: food security, housing affordability. So if you have a good plan, you can approach these organizations and partner with them and suggest the grants that they can write, and often they do have grant writing resources to support you. I can tell you they're all ears these days, that's for sure. And so that's a way to hack the system.
And speaking further to that hack, I've come to realize, you know, having renderings and conceptual design plans makes a huge difference when you go and speak to these folks. It really does. You know, our resources, even just that, you know, like the resources that we create and what you're bringing to the table, what we're all bringing to the table. You know, pictures speak 1,000 words, videos speak millions of words. Yeah, for sure. And that really does generate excitement when you go and speak to these folks that are working in the regional districts, in the offices there, because I have conversations with these people, and a lot of them are like us. They want us to succeed, believe it or not.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Jean-Marc,
get together. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. No.
Well, I was going to change topics to a different question that came up, which is somebody asked about, you know, traditional square box stock housing. And this is really where CoHo initially started, was realization that much of our province is zoned for multiple traditional housing on the property. And then we have a bunch of really interesting historic properties that were built pre-zoning. So farm estates, properties like the Horseshoe Bay Cottages that had 8 small homes on 2 lots. And really there's a great opportunity to find housing stock in your region that might suit your needs, and then work together instead of it just being, you know, owned by one person or with other, you know, family members and workers occupying it, or rental units occupying it, to utilize the co-ownership opportunity to create more affordable solutions. Maybe not the $50,000 price point that would be the ideal here, but this is a lot of what our bread and butter is, working with existing housing stock and existing zoning to create more options. So there definitely are options in the traditional model, and it's really exciting though to see all this conversation about pushing those boundaries to new forms as well.
That's great. Yeah, super. I'm just going to share quickly the results from our poll. So what are the challenges for you to start a low-cost village with a group? Obviously 67% lack of knowledge to get it done. Don't know where to find a group, 40%. Not sure where to find land or live, 44%. No money to invest, 25%. I'm stuck in a big city, 6%. What is your budget for living in a low-cost village? I can sell my place in a big city, 33%. Awesome, big city people. We could have you here as leaders of the movement. I have $10,000 to $50,000. That's great. We got a good chunk of people, half are able to do this today. And then the limited budget, of course, this is not an issue. You've got people that can invest via corporation into these villages, help buy the infrastructure, and then subsequently rent out these units to those that can't afford it, or rent it out or sell it at lower cost. There's all sorts of different ways that Rick and Noam and the team can kind of really slice and dice it for different groups to afford it. Everybody wants to service the locals. Of course, you're building a village out in rural and you want to kind of announce here locally that you've got a couple of extra units for locals to enjoy. So last question was, would you live in a dome village? That was me. Of course, I'm pretty obsessed about domes because it's a beautiful shape, and it's an organic structure that I think is going to come through along with all sorts of shapes and sizes with automated technologies. So hells yes, it's super cool. Yay, dome lovers out there, rejoice. I'm not sure, of course, if you want to experience it, I will also send you different places that you can go check out in BC, in your neck of the woods, to sleep in a dome of any kind. You've got the yurts out there, of course. You got the round structures, and then depends on the group of land, of course. So I think we've been very clear tonight that there's a lot of steps that you can work with Brian and Noam on to really make sure that you know all the components you need to before you get into business with a group. I could say that in the startup world too, in the digital startup space. It's not about the product, it's about the team. It's about the team. It's about the team. It's all about the team. The products, there's lots of innovation. And land, we got a lot of it. It is about that group. So how are you going to go and meet them? We hope to streamline this process. But for now, let's do some matchmaking. And CoHo BC does a fantastic matchmaking session. I experienced one yesterday, getting into breakout groups, getting to know each other, offline, online. And anything is better than what we have. That is for sure. Okay. That is great.
And Jean-Marc, you just mentioned this model where, yes, we're looking at owner occupiers coming together, but there's definitely a role for investors as well to come and support others. And I don't know, we're running out of time, but Matt Fiddler is on the call from the Horseshoe Bay Cottages, and they have an interesting model where it's 8 owner occupiers plus 4 or 5 investors who've come in to create an affordable pathway for people who couldn't afford the full share of their model. And I was wondering if, Matt, if you wanted to speak for a moment about your model.
Yeah, I'd love to, no problem. Thanks, Noam. Ours is obviously a little bit different than a lot of the things that have been discussed in this call. We're here in the big city. We're in West Vancouver on the side of a hillside right in the Horseshoe Bay Village. We have 8 units of 100-year-ish old, originally very small fishing cottages, 400 to 600 square feet. We assembled a group of strangers 2 years ago with the guidance of Noam and a lot of hard work and persistence. And in the year and a half, 2 years since, we've been kind of upgrading the units and building our community and carrying on. But it's a little bit unique in the sense that, we found a property that would be ideal for this and then work to assemble a group first. I think most people do it the other way around. They have a group and they find a property. And one of the core members of our group was an existing rental tenant here, which is amazing, because we were able to save her house for her and her 2 boys that go to school up the street, and she's now an owner. So pretty exciting project, but pretty different. It was basically just inspired by a need in our group. Exactly. Thanks for posting that, Jean-Marc. Everyone in our group, one way or another, through a divorce or my house was demolished, my rental house that I lived in, one way or another, everyone in our group had been displaced. We had people who even lost all their stuff in the flood, if you remember the atmospheric river of 2021. We were all a bunch of displaced people, and there's this incredible picturesque property. And essentially, through a lot of hard work and perseverance, we just found a way to make it work. I don't know if that sums it up or not. No.
Well, that's a great summary. And I also just want to point out that people came into that investment with anywhere from, I don't know the exact numbers, but 50,000 to 400,000.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right.
there was a differential pathways based on your needs, but because of those differential investments and the support of outside investors, they were able to make the model work. So there's a lot of creative things we can do to make this happen.
We you know what, we often, that's a really good point, Noam. We often glaze over that when talking about our project. But something I think that made it work, because we had a very short timeline. You know, we basically got ourselves under contract of sale and then said, okay, we got a few months to figure this out and somehow close the sale. And it's not a very affordable property as well. Something that made it happen was focusing on the community, focusing on finding people who'd be right for this, and then allowing them to come in and invest based on their ability and their need. And certainly I think everyone in the group has seen that the majority of what I bring to the table is hard work and sweat equity and leadership rather than actual money. But it works out because we have a kind of a mix, and we were able to get it done based on, you know, focusing on finding a good fit first, and then after that discussing people's abilities and their housing needs and specifics.
Awesome.
That's, you know, I just noticed someone looking for investors, heading to a real estate investor networking event. I'm working with a lot of people right now who are scared to have their money in the bank, and what a great thing to invest into people's lives and get, you know, fair market value on your return of investment. So there really is a lot of opportunity for investors, and that's going to be a goal of mine too, to reach out and try and get more in our network, because you know, a lot of it does come down to money, and it's wonderful to see collaborations get together who have different financial capacities and live together harmoniously and laterally.
Yeah, completely agree. That is fantastic. I'm just sharing here a screen that kind of explains a bit of a process that we started here just recently. So as we described, you know, you're either a group or an individual interested in village development, and the group or individual can sign up on one of our platforms. We're going to share all this information again after. We'll have this process really, really clear, where you can sign up, how you get more information on either matchmaking or legal or different structures, corporate structures, as well as how you can do, set up your village with different infrastructure. You can reach out to Noam Brian on landowner matchmaking. Myself and the Kootenays, I've got some opportunities ready to go, and lots coming to me every single day. So reach out to me if you're interested in that. I'm not a real estate agent. I'm just a matchmaker, passionate about it here, building dealership, and lawyer, of course, for your legal entity, Richard. Myself, I consider myself a bit of a housing innovation technologist. Ryan, he's the off-grid infrastructure man. And again, we'll send you links to his platform, and you can connect with him anytime. And of course, this matchmaking completes and the process begins for land purchase, legal setup, technology. We're able to kind of really get your project out to different groups, whether it's existing groups that we didn't mention today, like the Global Eco Village Network, or an IC Match. There's just a few. Again, we'll email you this to get your project out and circulating, our own platforms, our own networks. And then obviously it's just kind of really facilitating these group events, looking at financing tools, and more. So anyway, this is just kind of a loose draft process here. Go forward. I hope it makes sense. We'll get a lot more clear. So again, some of this can be streamlined, and you can showcase one individual in your group that takes on legal with Rick, and another individual that gets into the infrastructure with Ryan, and then myself. You can consider me a housing innovation guy. If you need to look at a wide variety of housing innovation, you can reach out to me.
May I just one thing,
yeah,
kind of in closing, Jean-Marc?
Yeah.
One thing that I found in my 40 odd years of basically working around this area is that you really should search out professionals and people who've got experience in this area. That experience unlike in any other area that I work in, that experience is essential and it's important. It's the old saying, if you don't know what you don't know, right? And it's really important to basically search out the proper professionals.
That's right. Yeah. And so I'm happy to say that honestly, I've never seen a better group of professionals than what we have today. Like, I am floored because it's been years searching for this. And every single day, I've been like, yeah, but there's still the questions. Now, you've got this team that have executed on 100 co-ownership agreements and really know how to hack the system if you want to do it differently. So, rely on this team. And yeah, it really is the key to go forward. You have all sorts of intentional communities and eco villages that have started over the years and failed. And believe me, I've been part of those. It's purely because you did not have the team and the process dialed. So once you walk through, or you've identified somebody who's going to walk through this process, you'll find yourself very rewarded because the end result is great success. So yeah, big props to this team and the panelists here. And thank you all for showing up today. This is a powerful movement, undoubtedly, that people are going to hear about more and more. It's all over the news. If you look up co-ownership BC, lots of articles around this, and you'll hear more. I can say that there is 100 other housing innovation rock stars besides the companies that I'm involved that are going to come out in the next couple of years that are going to just blow our minds. And that's why I'm super excited at the moment and doubling down on this entire village development. So yeah, thank you all again for showing up. And yeah, any other last words here for anyone? Let me know.
Great event.
No. Hey, awesome. Featuring Noam here. I'm going to stop sharing. What did it do? So we can see all each other. Here we go.
Cool. Are we still live here? Like live? Like,
Yeah, we are.
Live? Yeah,
we are.
Yeah, I know. As you were talking there, Jean-Marc, it really started to resonate with me. I've been, we're all forward thinkers here, and as we're forward thinking, we're manifesting things consciously and subconsciously. And I've been having this vision of like tiny home villages, etc. But now you've brought this really modern, future, stable, tried and tested, like, with the geodesic dome, there really is that's something I haven't thought about. And realizing having Ryan on the team. So I see a lot of strength in Noam and myself and CoHo and Rick having those pieces, and then putting that together with the infrastructure of the actual dwellings, modern dwellings. I walk a lot of properties, like that was mentioned earlier, these box housing, and we just so this is new. It seems it's exciting, practical, and yeah, so it's amazing to kind of catch fire with you. It's a pleasure. So I look forward to what we can all create within our team, and ultimately what we can create globally, right? Because we're in this global community. So kudos, and it's pretty cool being modern too right now, seeing how you're dialing in fiber optics, and our networks getting tightening, because it is allowing us the capacity to connect like this, and really expedite the process. So right on.
Awesome. Well, yeah, lots of props here in the chat. Again, we'll connect with you by email, share the presentation, the recording, and a lot of resources. And stay tuned for the next event. Noam mentioned the CoHo BC events. I'll also list out a variety of other events. We're looking for events that you're hosting in your neck of the woods. Please send them to us and make sure that we're all part of this collective. We'll make sure that it gets out on the interwebs. And yes, have a fantastic evening all. Any last words?
Thank you, Jean-Marc, for pulling this together. Everything involves, a key person to spark the excitement. So it's really exciting to see your passion and your commitment to making this happen. So thank you.
Definitely. Thank you very much, Jean-Marc.
Thank you, guys. Right on. Okay, have a pleasant evening. I hope you dream about our regenerative future.
Bye, all.
Right on. Take care, everyone.